Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are back. Oh, my camera's off a little bit there already. Goodness. We are back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are back. Oh, my camera's off a little bit there already. And I forgot to mute the stupid audio, and I already did that a little bit ago, so sorry about the nasty echo we just had there. Holly and I are back to do part 2 on our series Secrets of the Royal Society. Manufacturing science, from Isaac Newton to Charles Darwin. And Holly and I have a lot of notes to go over. Hopefully this show goes as planned. We didn't have quite enough time to plan it out like we wanted to. We also thank Caleb Thomas in advance for all of his research contributions that he did to this for this episode. And so thanks for that. Also thanks to Carl and David and Giuseppe, Jeff, all of you for donating this week and helping us out. And by the way, we're trying to get Holly out here to California next week to do research and a bunch of other stuff, get some writing done if we can afford it. So we're going to beg all of you tonight to help support us, help get Holly a ticket out here. The price is really expensive right now because it's summertime. But for those of you who are willing, please contribute, and we greatly appreciate. Thanks, by the way, King TL, for the $5 donation. Thank you so much. That was awesome of you to already toss us a $5 right out the gate there. Really appreciate that. Already got the trolls out there thumbing down the show before we've even gotten started. That's always cute. But you know, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff to cover on this topic. We're going to go further into the Royal Society, and we were hoping to cover more besides Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, but that's going to be the primary focus tonight. We may have to do a part 2 to part 2, you know, or a part 2B or whatever. Holly, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jan. So thanks, King, for the $5. And yes, Jan forgot to mention, but it is also my birthday this week. My birthday is the 14th, which is Bastille Day. And yes, I would like nothing more to be able to see Jan this week for my birthday month, as I call it.
Please.
So, and also just thanks to everyone that's helped me out on my channel. Someone sent me this shirt in the mail for my birthday, so thanks for that. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk this evening about some of the members of the Royal Society that we've been researching as we've been, you know, all of this stems from our original Salem research, and it's endlessly fascinating to see how this one research project about Salem has splintered into the idea of the promotion of modern science and this massive organization called the Royal Society. And so we're connecting it from Newton. Everyone knows about Isaac Newton, or at least you thought you knew about him a little bit learning in school, but the mythology of Isaac Newton and his stranglehold over the Royal Society for a long time. And then also we're going to connect it to another pretty famous Royal Society member, the Darwins, and talk about the Darwinism too. So it's going to be fun, you guys.
And King TL just donated another 10, so he's already up to 15 tonight. Candor just donated 5. He says, take a picture of the horizon on your flight. The plane flies over a flat plane. And there's actually some pilots going after. I don't really want to get into that topic because it's so deep, so vast, you know, but when
we'll get new trolls when we do that, for sure.
Yeah, you know, yeah, we'll get a whole slew of new trolls when we start hitting that stuff. But, you know, so the Royal Society really ties into all of the heliocentrism and all of this stuff, and it's constantly this promotion by the Royal Society and quote-unquote science. And it was Caleb Thomas who pointed out that science actually is a derivative of the word seance, apparently, like as in like witchcraft. And I would not be surprised if that was accurate. All it's like, yeah, like Holly says, like, exactly so. So thanks everybody for the $20 we're up so far. We only need about like 200 or 300 more to go. Please, somebody out there, like, you know, make an angel donation and help us out tonight. We'll love you forever and ever.
Wow.
So
I feel like I'm on like QVC or something now. Or...
Oh yeah, right. So, oh, by the way, I got rid of the Heil microphone. I went back to the Shure microphone. I'm hoping that the audio sounds a lot warmer on my side tonight. I just, I appreciate the donation of that other microphone. It's just the audio didn't sound as crisp and clean, and I was cringing. A little reverb on my side. Uh-oh. Dan Simmons says, I've got a little reverb. I'm not sure what's going on there. But that's happened before, with or without. I don't know. Maybe if I turn that down, it'll pull that. Maybe it's coming out. Thank you, Polygonal, for construction for the $10 donation. But I don't know if it's, maybe I'm speaking too close to the microphone. Hopefully,
I don't know why it does that. So it jumps in sometimes where you have like some sort of weird surround sometime.
Yeah, it says,
start delay. Yeah.
It says my mic has a tiny delay echo, about like 5 milliseconds. Uh-oh. Tiny turn down treble.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Here, how's that? Sorry, I'm reaching over to the soundboard here. Hopefully that cuts it out. You sound like you're in a tunnel. Oh, great. Well,
I don't know. You sound okay to me, but I don't know what's going on with your mic. So hopefully it'll
Did that help turning the highs down there, anyone? Sorry, we're doing a sound check. Thank you, Baraya Kosravi. Happy birthday, Holly. Your research has been priceless. Thanks, everybody. See, I can't even do that. I have to look at my hands when I do that. Pretty funny. So let's see. Well, hopefully it's Dan Simmons says it's not that bad. King T Sound says okay. So sorry, we're doing a sound check here live on the air. We, it's kind of hard to do it until I hear the audio afterward. Polygonal says it's bearable. Great. Well, with this microphone, it used to sound a whole lot better. I'm not sure what is going on, but anyway, I might have to switch back to the other microphone. Still very short, single echo. What if I lean back more? Does that cut out the echo? Anyone, Bueller? So maybe I'll just try and stay back. Maybe it's just picking it up out of my headphones. I'm hoping not, but everything should be set properly there. Can I still watch and listen? That's funny. So let's see. So basically tonight we're going to be getting into the Royal Society, which is a pseudo-scientific organization that's had a stranglehold on science, so-called science, since 1640, and today it promotes things, through guys like Richard Dawkins. It promotes things like cannibalism and New Age mysticism and anything that's contrary to logos and truth, and even, especially attacking Christianity from every possible angle. So, we're going to try to dig into that tonight, and hopefully my audio isn't too terrible. The delay is off as low as it can be. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to find somebody to help me do some sound checks. Steve, if you're listening tonight, give me a call sometime soon so we can hopefully work on that, or somebody else out there who knows audio. But so why don't you start off, Holly, and let's go with 1687.
All right. So we had discussed about the beginnings of the Royal Society starting off at Gresham College, and it started off right after the 1666 Great Fire in London and the plague. And so some big names within the scientific community got together and started up. They got a royal charter from Charles II, and with that, they launched the official Enlightenment movement. And the biggest proponent of science, as we all know, is probably Sir Isaac Newton. He was knighted, and he had, the popular mythology is that, apple fell on his head and he, discovered or came up with the theory of gravity. And you might have learned that in school, and that's what we're all taught to believe. Like, it's true, but it's not really true. And it's kind of strange that we have this mythology creeping up with the connection to the creation of science. So it reminds me of the eureka moment that we had other times within science, where it's just a magnificent stroke of genius, you could say. And so with the 1687, the Royal Society published Sir Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica with the help of Edmund Halley. And I've discussed Halley before. He was the individual whom Halley's Comet is named after. And as we have discussed in previous shows, that Edmund Halley and Halley's Comet, the comet would seem to circle itself around before any sort of ominous or interesting thing was going on in London. So we've discussed previous times throughout history when Halley's Comet seems to go around every 75 years or so, and it was named after Edmund Halley. And the Principia Mathematica is really the one of the most popular and well-known pieces of literature published by the Royal Society even to this day. It's one of the most influential books of all time, and it really places the idea of heliocentrism with gravity. And 16 years later, because his book was so popular, he became the president of the Royal Society from 1703 until 1727. So I'm going to pass it over to Jan now.
Now, Polygonal makes a point. The second law of thermodynamics is from the steam era and requires a closed system. They do this to ensure dependence on oil. Now, I've covered this previously on the show. Oil is abiogenic and not from fake dinosaurs and whatnot. It actually comes from the volcanic action of the Earth. But what's interesting is the law of thermodynamics is also what the calorie system is based on. That we're told is we should count calories for what we eat, etc., as if our bodies actually burn our foods, etc., rather than absorb them. Now, I want to point out the obvious cliche, and somebody else caught onto it. English Island points out Apple computers, but Sir Isaac Newton, the apple falls on his head. Okay, so this is like a tip-off. The apple, the fruit of the tree, etc. So it's kind of a little inside joke that they're trying to trick you. And of course, Apple computers, the first Apple computer was sold for $666.66. Another wink, wink in your face. And of course, the Apple's logo has a bite taken out of it, showing the satanic reference. So it's important to point that that little reference out. So Sir Isaac Newton, he becomes head of the Royal Society in 1703, and he's the president, and he's the president until 1727. And using Kepler's law of planetary motion and his law of gravity, Newton removed, quote-unquote, the last doubts of the heliocentric model of the solar system. I've got a bunch of images and whatnot I want to show during this episode, if I can get the right window up here. So we're just talking about the Royal Society and a lot of their stuff here, but and we're going to go into this more here in just a minute. But Sir Isaac Newton was a big occultist, and his so-called lost alchemy recipe was recently discovered, and people can go through and they can read these articles about live science. Isaac Newton's recipe for magical philosopher's stone rediscovered. Of course, we've exposed that the philosopher's stone was cinnabar, which is mercury ore, and it's actually used in the real manufacture of gold. So they're not trying to turn lead into gold per se. That's kind of the cover story. Alchemy is very much involved in cryptography and lies to cover up the facts and truth of what they're really doing. So they'll use cryptography, they'll use steganography, all of these things to hide what they are really talking about, and it was actually in the designed for the they were using it for the manufacture of real gold as well as alloys. Now, Michael is saying that the echo is slightly longer. My goodness, I don't know what to do.
Jan, would you try maybe jiggling and making sure that the microphone's plugged in properly and everything? I just want to talk about, there's several people in the chat talking about apples and going off on all the times that we witness the apple symbolism in popular culture, etc. And that, yes, that could be a fascinating show. We could do a whole show just about the apple and apple symbolism. That's interesting. But also just going back quickly to the story of the apple falling on Newton's head and him discovering gravity. I tried to do some research today and figure out when that story actually came into popular culture, because it's basically admitted that that story was a hoax, and yet it's the whole launch of the modern gravitational field theory. And it appears as though Lord Byron, George Gordon Byron, Lord Byron, people know of him as the friend of Percy Bysshe Shelley. His daughter Ada Lovelace was one of the first computer programmers. And it appears as though Lord Byron was the first to actually popularize this idea of the apple falling on Newton's head. And there's a quote he has a poem, and his quote is, Lord Byron, quote, "When Newton saw an apple fall, he found a mode of proving that the earth turned round in a most natural world called gravitation. And thus is the sole mortal who could grapple since Adam with a fall or with an apple." So there's some real interesting facets to that quote from Lord Byron, and how this is the quote unquote launch of gravity from here. So it appears from what I've done research today that Byron was the one who popularized the idea of the apple falling on Newton's head and therefore launching the popularization of the theory of gravity. So back to you, Jan. I just wanted to mention that.
Can you hear me now? Is the audio any better? Anyone? Can you hear me? Is anyone hearing me? I guess nobody was hearing that, so I was talking to myself. I was just trying different buttons to see if it was working, and apparently nobody was hearing me. So most people think that Sir Isaac Newton came up with calculus. Now, when we calculate something, we're supposed to be using, the word calculate from calculus, etc. But another thing that pops up when we begin to research, oh goodness, where is it? The history of Sir Isaac Newton and all of this lovely stuff. Oh goodness, here it is. So this is actually where the word calculus comes from, to calculate, from Calcutta or Calcutta, and Sir Isaac Newton and those at the Royal Society and at Oxford actually stole the theories from India, and they couldn't thoroughly understand what the theories were about, and they just distorted them. But indeed, Sir Isaac Newton did not invent calculus. It was stolen from India, and this is where we get the word calculate, from Calcutta, India. And somewhere up here, I have I'll just show it here on the screen, and I'm going to go through a little bit of this. And of course, last year with Jacob Duelman, etc., we debunked the Dark Age theory. The Dark Age is 99% chance never happened. But you can see that in this paper, and you can find it online, Sir Isaac Newton, the calculus thief, and just like guys like Einstein, who plagiarized and stole most of his work, most of these people at the Royal Society were doing the same thing. They were stealing their research. And just to read a little bit of this, the whole world is under the impression that Isaac Newton is the father of calculus. The truth is that calculus was understood and practiced in Malabar of India, which had the school of astronomy and mathematics even before Christ was born. It was used to express Vedic physical laws in mathematical terms and to calculate rates of change in astronomy and astrology. Malabar is the place where Vasco da Gama landed in 1498. St. Thomas, disciple of Jesus, had died in Malabar. The Great Pyramids of Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Egypt was or were designed by architects proficient in astronomy and Vastu from Calcutta, with tunnels from the Pharaoh's chamber at 90 degrees between Al-Nilam of Orion belt and the North Star. Of course, when we look at the history of Tartary, this vast empire that spanned most of the northern hemisphere, we can see that parts of India and China and Asia, etc., were all part of Tartary. And as Anatoly Fomenko goes into in his extensive series, History, Fiction, or Science, he shows that all of these were contemporary and not just, the whole theory developing or evolving one after the other, especially the theory of Christ. But he also shows in that book that the mathematics that was used in Egypt was Tartar, and it was their the Tartar king burial grounds there. So they've more than likely 99% chance manufactured a whole history to cover up how they stole all of this stuff and covered it up. But I recommend people reading this to read this article. It's pretty extensive. They took calculus to Europe. From there, the likes of Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz, Isaac Newton, and Robert Hooke, another member of the Royal Society that we've exposed, raced with each other to translate, reinvent, and market it in their own names in an acrimonious manner. And so, it was John Wallis, while he was the keeper of Oxford University archives, who first started pondering over translated mathematics stolen from India. John Wallis patented Vedic math, infinity and infinitesimal, Vishnu reclining in a horizontal A position in his own name. The rest he could not understand. Whatever he could make head or tail, he included in his Arithmetica Infinitorum, and treatise on algebra. And so we can begin to see how these guys were all frauds. They get in there, they steal all of this stuff from India, they patent it as their own, and they use it to promote their fraudulent claims, and self-aggrandizement, essentially. So Caleb Thomas had sent me a funny image I want to show here. Let me see if I can find it. It says, Sir Isaac Newton needs new math to prove his laws, so he invents it. And that's pretty much the sum total of what he actually did.
I guess your audio is better from the chat comments. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but thank goodness. So from here, basically, as we start to see calculus being brought into the Enlightenment era, we start to see this in the 1700s, calculus being used to explain the heliocentric model. And Newton based a lot of his work off of several previous scientists, which we will mention. But Newton, with his book Principia Mathematica, he was able to later rest and remove the last doubts, it is claimed, of the heliocentric model of the solar system. So he was using Kepler's law of planetary motion. And so Newton at first was discussing something called the ether, which some people in the chat might know about ether. It's used to be known as the fifth element. It was also called the quintessence within classical scientific theories. And at first, Newton was using ether to explain gravity, and then slowly ether was removed from the scientific equation by the Royal Society. And then, as we will discuss later, it was kind of brought back in to scientific theory and quantum physics, etc., under different names, of course. But the idea of ether, if you start to look into modern science, especially quantum physics, quantum mechanics, ether starts to sneak its way back in under different names.
And I used to be a network engineer, and of course we have Ethernet, which is what all of the computers are connected by as Ethernet cables. We have John the Savage. Ether equals pseudoscience. It's funny because to make that claim, you have to base it on all of the pseudoscience out of the Royal Society that we're exposing in this episode. So you might want to tune in, John, and pay attention. So, so Newton stole the inverse square law from Kepler, and Newton was an atheistic Kabbalist focused on alchemy, like spy John Dee. And I wouldn't be surprised if, for a second, if Isaac Newton was another spy. But he also stole much of Kepler's work and changed it to fit the new science of the Royal Society agenda, and his ideas of gravity replaced the ideas of ether. Now, I want to play a little clip here. Let's see if I can find it. Something we found a little bit ago. Oh, goodness. What did I do with that? Here it is. So I want to play this clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson and just watch how he fumbles and just absolutely can't explain. And thank you, Uncommon Conspiracies, for the $5 donation. He said, ever thought about a show on absolute truth? We'll have to consider that. Let's see. So let's just play this clip here. Oh, goodness. And I'm going to have to, I guess you guys can't hear the audio on that. My goodness. Or can you? Oh, boy. Let's see. Maybe you will be able to hear it. Let's go with it.
What is gravity?
I have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. Okay. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know.
So did I accidentally ask a deeper question than I meant to?
Yeah, no, you were meant to ask deep questions.
Apparently I was.
In life. So to say, what is it? I think Einstein, in an Einsteinian answer, we would say gravity is
anybody quoting Einstein has got a problem there.
And objects will follow the curvature of space-time, and we interpret that as a force of gravity. That's probably the best answer I can give to a what is gravity question, or why is there gravity. That's the best I can do there. I think that's a good start. And I can also say that Einstein noted that matter tells space how to curve. Space tells matter how to move.
Say that again.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is. No, I want to get that.
Yeah,
I like
so,
that. That's a T-shirt.
Matter and energy will curve the fabric of space.
Okay.
And it's that curvature that tells other matter how to move in the curvature of space itself. And so Einstein juxtaposed those in a poetic phrase where he said, matter tells space how to curve, did I get that right? Yes. Matter tells space how to curve, space tells matter how to move. It's beautiful.
That is.
So, we can begin to see how the leading scientists, the leading physicists are full of sophistry themselves, and they can't even explain it. And this is all because it's based on this Einsteinian, Newtonian stuff that, and I'm no physicist by any stretch of the imagination, but each one perpetuates the nonsense of the last, and they keep going on and on and on with this false math and these false models and this stolen mathematics out of India that they twisted into a whole new belief system called scientism to take people away from looking at logos or truth as the true religion. And so somebody just asked a minute ago, and then I'll pass it to you, Holly. Somebody asked if, let me see, have you looked into Goa's theory of color? And this is Christian. Thank you for the $5, Christian. Have you looked into Goa's theory of color, which is a contradiction to Isaac Newton's? So, interestingly, let me just put this up here. I do have another image. Hopefully I didn't lose that. It was right here. Oh, goodness. Maybe I accidentally closed it. I'll have to see if I can find that. Here, I do have it in the show notes here, so I'll just show that, and we'll have to reveal a little bit of the show notes here. So, you know, basically what they did is they even inverted the whole color thing. And, you know, so Newton lied about this stuff, and he stole it, and he flipped it. They're constantly stealing other people's work, changing it, twisting it around, and using it for the Royal Society's agenda. So now they've got, you know, several generations of people believing in the nonsense theories that were promoted and are promoted by the Royal Society. And now we can see, you know, the Royal Society promoting cannibalism and mysticism and all of this stuff. A lot of serious nonsense coming out of the Royal Society. And of course, people can log into the brain database on the Logos Media website and check out all of the connections in here to the various people that you know, we've been exposing over the years. And here's Robert Hooke here, whom I just mentioned, another Royal Society member involved with John Dee. These guys are all spies. They're all working for the Royal Society. They're all promoting lies and scientism. Here's Emanuel Swedenborg, who, you know, influences Aldous Huxley. Emanuel Swedenborg wrote the original Heaven and Hell, which, of course, Aldous Huxley did a new version, twisting it to promote psychedelics, etc. And but all of these guys are in cahoots. They're all promoting the same false science. Holly?
Just a quick mention to everyone. Thanks if you could hit the like button. And we are trying to raise some money to get me out to California for a plane ticket. So if anyone wants to throw in a super chat, it'd be much appreciated. It's my birthday this week. So I just wanted to mention quickly about color. I'm a big fan of, you know, Goethe's color wheel, and he really went into the ideas about opponent color theory, like before it was really put out there. So after images, colored shadows, complementary colors. As someone who has done a lot of painting, I've been fascinated by color and mixing colors. And if you want to have some white paint that appears like whiter, if you want to brighten up some paint, you actually drop a little bit of black into the white paint. And that has always fascinated me, because it appears as though a lot of color does have to do with perception. And someone, we don't know who, sent you a book about the evolution of the eye, right? Do you remember that book?
Yeah, and I appreciate the book. Somebody sent me a couple weeks ago trying to support, you know, because E. Michael Jones had mentioned that they can't prove the evolution of the eye, but it doesn't make sense. So somebody sent a book. I wish I had grabbed it. You know, I do have Darwin's book here with Julian Huxley's. It's the 150th anniversary edition with Julian Huxley's introduction in it right there, which of course is humorous, and we'll go more into that, as well as Pigliucci and Mueller, Evolution, the Extended Synthesis. You know, what's happened is over the last 150 years, they've rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, quote-unquote, Darwin's theory, and they still claim it's Darwin's theory, even though even though it's entirely not Darwin anymore. But they keep working it and stretching it every time there's flaws in it to try to, you know, instead of following the path of the evidence, they try to force the evidence to the conclusions that they want.
So just quickly to mention about color, one more thing. So Newton viewed color as a physical problem, so involving light striking objects and then entering our eyes. And Goethe realized that sensations of color reaching our brain is also shaped by perception. So the mechanics of the human vision, so the eye itself, how we process information, and depends on the object, the lighting, and then our perception. So just interesting. So thanks, Christian, for bringing up that topic and connecting it back to the Royal Society. So
now Robulus X2 says gravity. If it's heavier than air, it would fall down. No, that's rather humorous. Christian says Goas experiments with prisms expanded upon Newton, showing magnetic pole-like interactions between light and darkness that brought forth, rather than splitting, where did it go? Particles, sorry. I'm still echoing, somebody says. Boy, and I've turned down my mic.
It's not too bad, though. It's only like a tiny, like I heard it a little bit. It's not too bad, Jan. I'm
not sure what to do about it, you know. Oh, goodness. Anyway, you take over for a second while I plug into another plug on the mixer and see if that fixes it.
Okay, so just to back up a tiny bit and to talk about Newton with his book Principia Mathematica, how it basically put to rest the heliocentric model that was in the early 1700s. So he drew a lot of his theories from Copernicus, from Johann Kepler, and Galileo also. So Nicholas Copernicus had moved the Earth away from the center of the universe with the heliocentric theory, and he presented evidence of this with his book on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. That was way back in 1543. And then Johann Kepler wrote a book called A New Astronomy in 1609 that set out evidence that planets move in elliptical orbits with the sun at one focus, and the planets do not move with a constant speed along this orbit. And then from there, the foundation of modern dynamics were taken from Galileo's book, Dialogue on the Two Main World Systems, where he put forward the notion of inertia was implicit and used. And then he used inclined planes. And then there's René Descartes, who put in 1644 Principles of Philosophy, stated that bodies can act on each other only through contact. And then that's how they had to create light and gravity with the ether. So Descartes was still talking about this idea of ether, and then Newton went from there. And his book was so popular that he himself, like I said, was made the president of the Royal Society, and because he had put to rest the idea of the heliocentric model.
Can anybody hear me? No
okay,
audio.
Now I can hear you.
You hear me now? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
What is going on tonight?
Lost echo now, hopefully. All right, so, yeah, sorry, folks. Yeah, so this is Swedenborg's book, Heaven and Hell, that Huxley based, Aldous Huxley particularly based his stuff on. Now, all of these people all link back together, but now Holly just brought up René Descartes. In this book, which is Emanuel Swedenborg's Secret Agent on Earth and in Heaven, of course, Swedenborg was another spy, another agent for King George of Sweden, and he was friends with Descartes, who is another spy. And, of course, they're all influenced or influencing John Dee. John Dee also knew Descartes. And so, you know, it's a tight little cluster of spies. And, you know...
Peer review.
The so-called peer review system. If this book was donated to me a few years back, it's very expensive. It goes for $200 or $300. But I highly recommend if you can... get a copy of that sucker, read it, because it's absolutely fascinating in exposing all of the spies and Descartes and all of these people that are the so-called foundation of modern science. Polygonal says dark matter is just stretching the BS.
They're jumping the gun a little bit here, you guys.
Yeah, you don't get too far ahead. But yeah, I mean, dark matter, it's in the name. It's like black holes, dark matter. These are, you know, the dark ages. This is all of the terminology of the lie, you know, and once you start picking up on it, you can see that they're constantly promoting these same lies. So, oh goodness, so hopefully the audio problem is fixed now, but I don't see anybody complaining about it, so hopefully it's all right. So let's see. I'm not sure which points you read there that we were going into.
So I went into some of my notes about, I was connecting Galileo, who in 1589 had conducted experiments with gravity, such as dropping balls from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. This is what we're supposed to believe is the official narrative here. And that he discovered that they hit the ground at the same time, despite having different weights. So, you know, if you're in public school, you probably did that sort of experiment where you have like a heavy marble and a rubber ball and you drop them and they appear to fall at the same time. And then Newton's work 100 years later put together a picture of gravity that was good enough to last another 2 centuries or so. And then up until Einstein's theory of relativity, which we're not going to get into Einstein tonight, but he's part of this larger idea of connecting, you know, like people said, bringing up dark matter again. The idea of ether or quintessence, it kind of cycles back into scientific theory as we get into the dark matter era, as I've call it now.
And we're praying for some angel donations tonight to get Holly a ticket out to California this week. Please, 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 for her birthday. Low on funds. We can really use all your help. Please, folks, help out with that. And from Caleb Thomas, Isaac Newton took the ideas of pressure well understood by the inventors of the barometer and its primitive form of water, tubes, and reservoir, and inverted it into a theory he called gravity, where instead of ether pushing down as the principles of density, he proposed that it was an inward pull. Here we see another inversion, and again, you know, we did, in fact, Caleb was in, I think, in the show on inversion, just like we are accustomed to. So they always take things, they invert, they invert, they invert. They're constantly taking theories. Basically, you know, it's almost like the members of the Royal Society, they read through the Bible, and they take anything that's listed there, and then they just take it and they flip it to its opposite, constantly doing this game. So also, Newton screwed up the theory of colors, as we already discussed, that Goethe had already perfected. So again, we can see that Newton is inverting Goethe's work, and thank you, Vigilante. Welcome to California from a 4th-generation Californian. Thank you, John Savage, for another $10 donation. Happy birthday, Holly. He says, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. We're about up to $60 now for the donation for the airline
Flights
ticket.
from Portland, Maine are not cheap. Just so you guys probably know if you've ever been here. So
it's like way up there, and there's like no major
ridiculous
airports or anything. It's like out in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, they do charge a little bit more. But thank you so much for the $21 there, both of you. And so, again, you know, they're all alchemists. They're all turning lead into gold, which is really mercury, and using mercury to refine, purify gold, etc. And people can look up these articles that we showed on screen earlier. So the truth behind Sir Isaac Newton's apple, that was one that I forgot to show on screen earlier. Sorry about that, folks. But yeah, so he steals a lot of his work from Johannes Kepler, and keeps going down the list of fraud that we see so common with so many of these so-called scientists, and probably Einstein was probably the biggest fraud of them all. But in these things, in these articles, they show how Isaac Newton was trying to make sophic mercury, quote-unquote, a substance seen as a main ingredient of the philosopher's stone. And that's kind of a double double fraud there. It's actually the Philosopher's Stone is cinnabar, which is mercury ore, and then they use that to create metal alloys and gold, etc. You want to
That's from our research.
Right,
yeah.
That's from our research.
So I just wanted to mention the idea of ether because we've mentioned a couple times. Someone says that they're connecting all of this alchemy to astrotheology. Can you comment on that, Jan, real quick?
Say that again? Make sense I missed it.
Connecting alchemy to astrotheology.
Oh goodness, alchemy to astrotheology. Well, you know,
you have all on that.
You have all of the planets listed there, and then they turn the planets into gods. But again, that doesn't connect to logos, which is truth. They did apparently believe that the planets could affect certain attitudes. You know, when you were born, etc., could affect certain things, but. And we have a new Patreon support from John. Thank you so much for that, John. Much appreciated. $4 on Patreon there. But I don't, you know, and I haven't even read my own book that I published on astrotheology in years. You know, I published that, 12 years ago. It's hard for me to remember what I wrote myself back then, you know. So, anyway, do you want to go on from there?
I will say, you know, the Bible does talk about the stars and them having names. Psalms mentions it. There's other parts within in the Bible of mentioning that the stars do have influence. I mean, it depends on how much influence or what you believe if you're going to connect them to actual gods within the classical mythology, if we're supposed to believe that. But to get back to ether as the fifth element, it kind of comes and goes within science. And so the concept of ether was used in several theories to explain natural phenomena. So originally it was used to explain the traveling of light and gravity. And then in the late 19th century, they started to connect it through space as a medium through which light could travel in a vacuum, because the idea of vacuums, I don't think we're gonna have time to talk about the theory of vacuums, but that's another rabbit hole, if you will, to go down to. But the evidence for the presence of a medium, so ether was thrown out and then it's brought back into science again. So in Plato's Timaeus, he speaks about air. Plato mentions that there is the most translucent kind, in which is called by the name of ether. And it's also known as quintessence, is the Latin form of that. And so as we start to see in the early 1670s, Newton used the idea of ether to help match observations to strict mechanical rules in his physics. But then the idea of ether was thrown out. It became scientifically obsolete, it was the term. And then the development of special relativity showed that it was later needed. So the idea of dark energy was then proposed, which is a quintessence. And so it's a carrier for light and etc. within space. And then dark energy postulated as an explanation of observations of an accelerating universe. And then now it's known as the fifth fundamental force. So at this point, I'm speaking over my head. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just looking at the history of science. And I found it interesting that the idea of ether was talked about by Plato, Aristotle, quintessence. And then it's being, as we get into modern science and quantum physics and dark matter, it's been reintroduced, the same exact theory, but they don't want to call it ether again. They want to call it dark matter now.
Right. And you have to spin the joke. You have to make it about dark, And so going on with Newton, he was at King's College, and Newton supplemented his studies of Aristotle with Descartes Galileo Thomas Street, via whom he learned of Kepler's work, and Kepler, like John Dee, was also a member of the Rosicrucian order, which I just showed on screen there. And so here we have Kepler, and we have the Rosicrucian order. Here's spy John Dee. So all of these guys, they're all of these occultists. They're all these spies. It's the intelligence network. They're using alchemy. They're using cryptography. They're using steganography to... thank you, Janessa, for the $4.99 donation. Much appreciated. And they're using all of this to create a new science and a new misdirection that has kept people chasing their tails for the last 300 and some odd years, since, well, and thank you, Gokuchi Chi, for the $9.99 donation there. Much appreciated, everyone, for all your support tonight. We only need about $200 more to get her out here, and then we have to figure out how to get her back home. Or at least maybe I don't want to get her back home. I don't know. I'll keep her out here for a while. And let's see. So
who's gonna feed my fish?
Well,
I wanted to mention this book. So this is called I picked this book up because we were researching the Royal Society and their connection to Harvard when we were writing our book about the Salem witch trials, which we're still working on. It's basically, our book is going to change the entire study of the Salem witchcraft trials. But anyway, not to talk about how cool we are, but there's a book called Freemasonry and the Birth of Modern Science. And this book really blew my mind because the author, Robert Lomas, which we have another book of his, or you do, Jan. I don't remember which book it is, but Robert Lomas is an unapologetic Freemason. He himself is a Freemason who basically brags through this entire book that modern science was written and created and promoted by Freemasonry. And it happened around the same time. So the idea of alchemy and all of these rituals are written into the scientific method. And he also mentions Brother Sir Robert Moray, who was very influential in the creation of the Royal Society of Freemasonry. Robert Moray was a Freemason scientist and spy who worked for the British Royals. And so I definitely recommend this book, Freemasonry and the Birth of Modern Science, if you're interested in the web between. He talks about Freemasonic rituals influencing the peer review structure, influencing the Royal Society journals, and also the promotion of science. And it really just opened my mind up to the idea of science being connected with all of these spies.
Yeah, somebody was just asking about John Dee, and they were asking the magician John Dee. Well, that should clue you in right there too. And thank you, Annan User, for the $25 donation just now. We're almost up to $100 tonight. We can get her about a third of the way here. We can get her at least to her connecting flight. So
don't leave me in Jersey, please.
Yeah, don't leave her in Jersey, please. So he was an occultist, and you see guys like Terence McKenna, Aldous Huxley, Aleister Crowley, all of these guys, they cite John Dee. And again, you can go into the database and you can look at his intelligence connections. But this, and I'm going to show this book again. This book here is Emanuel Swedenborg, Secret Agent on Earth and in Heaven. And this book goes in extensively into John Dee's intelligence connections, as well as Swedenborg's and René Descartes, and many of these other guys who were just total, they're frauds. They're using cryptography. They're using steganography. That's what the alchemical art is. That's why people have such a hard time figuring out what the alchemical art says, because it's intentionally encoded, because they're spies and they have spy networks, and they send the information back and forth between each other to keep it secret, in other words, as well as using the cryptography for their plans for like this one talks about the the Jacobites' early plan in there, and somebody says as well as Manly P. Hall, that is absolutely correct. You can't forget that guy. And of course there's the Philosophical Research Society out in LA, which is a whole huge library filled with all sorts of occult books, and occult is really just another word for the intelligence community. It's hidden, it's occult. The best occultists are all tied directly with the intelligence community. And thank you, Giuseppe, for the $21.55 donation just now. We really appreciate it. We're getting there. We're getting her past Jersey. Come on, folks, we can do this. We can really get her all the way out here. We really appreciate all your help. Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, well, someone just mentioned the D-Wave computer. I've actually done a couple of videos about the strange theories and mysteries surrounding the D-Wave computer that has come out. And if you watch some videos about people who describe the D-Wave computer and how they're using quantum computing, they're basically creating something that is so cold. They're claiming that it's so cold that information can magically make its way into the computer, and very bizarre. And the people who are promoting D-Wave and who are working for D-Wave actually mention H.P. Lovecraft, and they call it the old ones, and they claim that the old ones are providing the information into the D-Wave computer. So, we're not quite there yet, but it reminds me of the scrying mirror and Enochian magic, which, of course, John Dee, which promoted and worked upon and was later found to all be a complete fraud. But I didn't want to go too far into that because we're just talking about science right now. But we've also brought up H.P. Lovecraft in connections to our Salem research. So it's a small world once we start to look into all of this. And just to quickly mention with Rosicrucians, also people were mentioning about alchemy. As Jan and I have discovered about the Philosopher's Stone being cinnabar and mercury, we can start to look at the Philosopher's Stone paintings and drawings of how the alchemical marriage is created. And if you start to look at the Rosicrucian works, it's all pretty hidden in plain sight. You can start to see what they talk about, the red dragon and the red stone, and all of it connecting into Rosicrucianism as well, just to mention that other organization, which is tied in with Freemasonry and the Royal Society.
Now, so since we're on the topic, we're going to jump ahead a little bit here, but since we were just covering H.P. Lovecraft, we got to bring him up because we're just about to go, well, if we make it, we're going to get to Darwin here in just a minute. But so H.P. Lovecraft, I have a connection in here, possible relation or possible influence to Professor Emeritus Michael Coe. Now, Michael Coe is the same guy who created the bogus 2012 end of the world scenario based off of the Mayan calendar. And now, of course, Professor Coe is, or was apparently, at least they claim was, a CIA agent as well as a Yale professor working directly for the Central Intelligence Agency. Again, we have the intelligence community, and this is, right off of his Wikipedia page. And let me see if they took that down. But right on here, it used to say that he worked for the CIA. So it'd be, let me see if I can find that citation there, because I just want to show people that I'm not making it up. Yeah, so Coe worked as a CIA case officer right there. Of course, only during the Korean War. Yeah. That's how you get to be a professor at Yale, is you're not in the CIA. I didn't believe in black swans until I saw one. But anyway, so Lovecraft influences Michael Coe. Now, interestingly, Michael Coe, his daughter is Sophie Dobzhansky. Sophie or no, Michael Coe's wife, is Sophie Dobzhansky. Now, Sophie Dobzhansky is none other than the daughter of eugenicist Theodosius Dobzhansky, who worked with none other than Julian Huxley and signed the Eugenics Manifesto with Julian Huxley, in fact. And let me see if I have that here. We can pull it up here, and we should be able to see their names right on here unless they pulled them down. Here's Theodosius Dobzhansky here, and here's Julian Huxley here. So we can see that this is well known that these guys are part of the eugenics programs going on, and they are all working in cahoots. Theodosius Dobzhansky is, of course, influenced by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, whom we've exposed many times over many years, who, of course, influenced Terence McKenna. Pierre was probably the main character behind the infamous Piltdown hoax, which is one of the largest so far exposed academic scandals in history. Of course, the whole of the Royal Society is an academic scandal yet to be exposed, but he influences people promoting the agenda for the CIA like Terence McKenna, and Terence McKenna is really heavy into these guys, and you can see all of Terence McKenna's intelligence connections here, heavily influenced by John Dee, Michael Coe, involved in cybernetics, the Esalen Institute, Naropa Institute. All of these are top intelligence fronts, and we can see a lot of the lesser in yellow are the lesser agents. I just have the bright, dark, blood red ones are ones that I've pretty well established through years of research are firm agents. Like we already know that Michael Coe was CIA. We can prove that easily. And we can prove that he created the BS 2012 theory that agents Terence McKenna promoted. Of course, I exposed years ago that McKenna admitted to being recruited to either the CIA or FBI and worked in public relations and worked also in deep background positions, to which he said the less said, the better. So we begin to see these tie-ins, even though we've gone from a completely different direction than psychedelia as the past, we're still getting right into the same core group of people that we've been exposing for years now, the same groups, the same centers, Fulbright scholars. That's another big group that all tie into this. Professor Daryl Hamamoto, Martin T. Orn, who, if I recall, was another MK Ultra guy. MK Ultra Subproject 84, so he's another CIA boy. Harvard, of course, heavily involved in CIA. William James, all of this stuff. So when we go through, we can see all of these repeated connections to the intelligence community, to eugenics, and of course, they're trying to bring themselves up through eugenics, and for the rest of us, it's dysgenics. So, the word eugenics is double-edged. It's not, for the elitists using it against us, it's eugenics for them, but it's dysgenics for us. So, you got to get your mind around that. But, we can also see guys like Daniel Penchbeck. He promoted these bogus theories, the 2012 end of the world scenario, just as Terence McKenna did. I think that the stoned ape theory that McKenna promoted was directly out of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's work, and so on. So, again, H.P. Lovecraft influencing or possibly influencing all of these people, influenced the Necronomicon, which was most likely authored by Peter Levenda. And again, that's all. It all keeps going round and round in circles with these same groups of people. And you just have to plug data into a database for 12 years to figure it all out,
Yeah, just to talk a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft before we get into Darwin. I swear we're going to talk about Darwin tonight because he's probably, we wanted to do this part 2 of the Royal Society, and the two largest scientific minds, if you will, minds or pop culture icons, as I like to think of, celebrities, were Newton and Darwin. So just to mention just one thing about H.P. Lovecraft, because he connects into our Salem research as well, because he was, a lot of his work was based off of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was born and raised, had a strong connection to Salem. And just to mention, in a lot of Lovecraft's writing, he mentioned something called Miskatonic Institute, or he mentions the city of Arkham, Massachusetts, and that's based off of the Danvers State Hospital. And so all of this seems to connect back into Salem once again, all the scientific research and H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft based a lot of his stories, a lot of his horror stories, his gothic fiction upon the town of Salem. So just to wrap up that idea, to go back to our notes. I think we should get back into our notes.
Sorry for the echo, folks, for those of you who just tuned in. I'm having a heck of a time with audio issues tonight. Not sure what's going on. If anyone wants to help me do a sound check after the show and try to resolve this once and for all, I'd appreciate it. John says, say it, society. Yeah, like Eric Cartman, Or say it like Ozzy Osbourne or something,
So the Royal Society created the Charles Darwin Fellow of the Royal Society. He was made a fellow. It was created in 1890, so they give out the Darwin Medal, which, there's something also called like the Darwin Awards, which isn't real, but they give it to people who are stupid. But which is neither here nor there. But 1890, the Darwin Medal was given out to Alfred Russel Wallace, which someone in the chat has mentioned him a couple of times, for his, quote, independent origination of the theory of the origin of species by natural selection. So Royal Society has been the largest promoter of the theory of evolution. And basically, as we've seen, that theory, along with gravity, has overtaken the entire world in the scientific community.
Now, of course, oh goodness, what was I going to say? Alfred Russel Wallace, Charles Darwin, that's what becomes the origin of species. They give credit to Charles Darwin and push Alfred Russel Wallace out. And then you can never go far. I don't think we're ever able to really do a show on any of this stuff without, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you can guess who I'm going to mention next. So you can't do a show.
Y'all can't do a show.
I can't do a show. If you hear the name Huxley,
it's a drinking game.
Yeah, it's a drinking game, but it's a smoking hot pile of you-know-what, because if a Huxley is associated to it, it's crap. And so, of course, Charles Darwin's propaganda manager, known as Charles Darwin's bulldog, was none other than Thomas Henry Huxley. This guy right here, one of the top.
Oh, John, just to mention, someone guessed it was Crowley, but that's number 2. Well, number 1 is Huxley, 2 is Crowley, so yeah, you get partial credit for that.
Yeah, Huxley, exactly. Somebody said Huxley, and we're at about 120 or so in donations tonight, folks, trying to get Holly a ticket out for her birthday. Please, please, please help contribute, everybody. Love you long time. So Thomas Henry Huxley was Charles Darwin's propaganda manager, and we did a show a couple of weeks ago about the X Club and what X means in popular society and everything. So Thomas Henry Huxley created the X Club to promote Darwin's theories. Now, what they did was they put 8 or 9 people in top positions in key universities to promote the whole theory. And so after Charles Darwin on the Origins of Species was published in 1859, the men began working together to aid the cause for naturalism and natural history. And natural history is a key term for anti-logos or anti-truth. And so they backed liberal Anglican movements. Now, of course, we've seen the Anglican Church promoting other ideas as well. I think it may have been the Episcopal Church as well. But a lot of that stuff comes out. Thank you, Brian, for the $2 donation. And he says, happy birthday. Thank you so much for that. But you can't really get anywhere without getting to these guys. So Joseph Dalton, the Daltons marry into the Darwin family, just as the Huxleys marry into the Darwin family. So you have the Huxley family up here, and you have, Angela Huxley Darwin. But all of these names, they keep repeating over and over and over and over. So you have the Darwin Wedgwood family married in to, it's a whole lot of crossbreeding of frauds marrying frauds. You have George Holden Huxley, who is involved in MK Ultra Australia, and oh goodness. So sorry everybody for my annoying audio fix. It was fixed for a few minutes. I don't know what's going on, so we'll have to figure it out later. But so anyway, all of this stuff. Of course, Julian Huxley. I held up I'll show it again here. The 150th anniversary edition of Darwin's book on the origin of species, and you can see Julian Huxley's name right there across the bottom, right there. Let's see if I can hold it straight, right there. But so they're always promoting the same agenda, and then you get, from Darwin's theory, it slowly gets debunked and doesn't work. So you have the new synthesis, and then the new synthesis, and then the extended synthesis is the newest one, where they try to fix and repair the theory, and they still call it Darwin's theory. You want to jump in there? Thank you, Philip, for your $10 donation. Really appreciate that.
We're getting there. So I just wanted to mention that if you do actually look up, Darwin.
Wait. Sorry, somebody. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Somebody said we should always mention the subtitle of Darwin's book, which is the full title is "The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection of the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life." So there you go. That really sums it up, that it's all about eugenics. Sorry about that. Oh, Bill just came in with a $50 donation. Woohoo!
Aww.
Thank you so much, Bill. That is so
awesome.
Appreciated. Now we're up to maybe 170 or so. Sorry, Holly. Go ahead.
So this is just an interesting side note, because you mentioned all of the interesting breeding between the Darwins and the Huxleys. There's also the Wedgwood families. If you start to look at the family tree of the Darwins, you see there's several mainstream news articles actually talking about how the Darwins suffered from severe inbreeding problems. So it's known that the widespread inbreeding between the Darwin and the Wedgwood families was probably to blame for Charles Darwin's ill health and childhood tragedies and infertility that blighted his family. So they looked over 4 generations of the Darwin-Wedgwood dynasty, as they call them, and there was massive inbreeding between the families, which seems a little bit bizarre because they did so much to study crossbreeding of plants, etc. And so they said that there was at least 25 intermarriages between the Darwins and the Wedgwoods, and they looked into inbreeding coefficient, like modern day scientists have looked into it, and they found severe problems with death and disease with the Darwin family, and Darwin's quote unquote favorite child, Annie, died from a strange disease, which they think was tied in with inbreeding. And even to this day, they're talking about how descendants of the Darwins are suffering from problems with inbreeding. So just an interesting side note from people from the family.
And thank you, John Savage, for or John the Savage, for the $5 donation. He says H.G. Wells, too. I'm sure you know that. So let's pull H.G. Wells up. I've actually done quite a few shows exposing H.G. Wells, but let's pull him up. Let's see if we can, here we go. H.G. Herbert George Wells. Of course, he was taught by Thomas Huxley, and then H.G. Wells taught Aldous Huxley, and that ties into the whole thing. Of course, we did a special exposing the War of the Worlds that was written by H.G. Wells, and that was a PSYOP created by the, now I'm forgetting, OSS, I believe. But all of these guys were in on it. It was part of the Princeton Radio Research Project, and I did a show with Dr. Hans Utter. Oh, it's been almost 3 years. We released it Hallows Eve in 2015. I highly recommend people check that out because, and at the time, we thought that the War of the Worlds was the earliest pattern of social control and using mass hysteria to control the population. But of course, that was before Holly introduced me to her work on Salem, and that took things back another 300 years earlier to expose whole new levels of this mass hysteria and how they did it. Somebody else says, English says Bertrand Russell, absolutely, all of these people. So definitely programming for fake aliens, absolutely. And so when you get rid of the geocentric model for the heliocentric model, and then you have these layers of things that this group of people surrounding the Royal Society promotes outward. And then once they establish all of this stuff, now they can start promoting aliens and UFOs and life on other planets and all of this stuff. But all of this stuff comes down from the Royal Society. So Uncommon Conspiracies asked if I said, if you all donate and help us get Holly out for her birthday, did I say love you long time? I did say that. Yes, good catch. So yes, we'll love you long time. We need some more donations. We're up to about 170. Please help out. Anyone, Bueller, help us out. We really appreciate it. Got 130 people watching live tonight at least, so... and I apologize for the nasty echo. I wonder if my mixing board is out because I've been having some audio trouble lately.
Yeah, someone says that you might have some problems with like the channels on your mixing board, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe it connects into your mic wrong or something. But yeah. I just wanted to mention that not only did the Royal Society promote promote evolution, Darwin's theories on evolution, and how this connects into racial cleanliness and i.e. inbreeding and eugenics. He also did a lot of research on the expression of the emotions in man and animals. So Darwin was one of the first individuals for scientific research. If you think about the advent and the beginnings of photography during this era. So photography was used to photograph emotions. It was used for facial scientific methods. So I've been wanting to connect this into, there's a lot of facial scan technology that's being utilized nowadays. And so the Royal Society, we might have to talk about this a whole other topic, but the idea that Darwin did work on emotions and human evolution. He conducted research on emotions over 3 decades using friends, family, and pets as study and experiment, and examined the role of sentiment, affection, and the development of moral behavior. And the Royal Society picked up on this. And it seems interesting that now it seems to be kind of coming back full circle. There's the idea of phrenology, which was the study of people's head shapes and determining someone's IQ and emotional state and criminality, etc., through phrenology. And now AI technology through facial scan technology is actually bringing back, it's basically pseudo phrenology. They claim to be able to determine your political affiliations, your intelligence, etc., and your criminality through facial scan technology. So this is also connecting back to Darwin and the Royal Society. So I would be interested to see what the Royal Society is doing. I actually subscribe to their YouTube channel, trying to see what they're talking about, if they're promoting facial scan technology now. And Amit's going to scream in a second, just so you know. So you know I take over.
Yeah, I'll take over so Holly can mute her mic for a second because Amit can get loud. So, Uncommon Conspiracies, thank you for the $5 donation. I also recommend checking out his channel. He's got some funny stuff on there. He does a good one making fun of Morrissey on there. I got a real kick out of. But I encourage you to do more shows, Uncommon Conspiracies. You got some good stuff. Thank you for doing those. But yeah, and John.
I liked his video. Uncommon Conspiracy did a good video on like how to date other woke people and how hard it is. It was pretty good. You could do a whole series on that for sure.
Yeah, we should have you on sometime. Maybe we could do a whole skit on that. So John the Savage says Philip K. Dick, and I've met Tessa Dick, Philip K. Dick's fifth wife. I haven't seen her in town for maybe 6 or 9 months, but she used to live actually just a few blocks from me, and I used to bump into her at the post office at least like once a month or so because we live in the mountains, and so everybody bumps into everybody else here in town. But I haven't seen Tessa Dick for a while. I haven't looked up on Wiki or wherever if she's still kicking or not, but and she was adamant that Philip K. Dick was an agoraphobe and was not part of the intelligence community and was fearful of going out to, because of the CIA, etc., being after him. So, yeah, and sorry, Stephen, for my earlier work before I woke, and he's talking about how my earlier work, I interviewed 55, 60 of the world's leading experts in psychedelics when I started the show, and that whole project, and let me show you, everybody. I'm going to grab something here really quickly. So that project was supposed to be a book that I never published, and I interviewed 55, 60 of the world's leading academic scholars and researchers on psychedelic drugs. This is a 1,000-page book that is just like, if I wrote the introductions for each chapter, the whole project would be finished. So in the middle of that project was when I woke up and realized that the whole thing was actually the MK Ultra program, and that all these people were, or most of them were fraudulent. I can't say all of them, but so I had to can the project, and that was when I changed the show, started exposing Wasson's work with the CIA, etc., in 2011. And so I've written quite a lot and done numerous shows making good on this early work and showing people how the CIA did all of that and exposing the MK Ultra program. So I recommend people checking out all of the work post 2011, where we really get in and expose all of that. And thank you, Hamish Ferguson, for the $10 donation just now. We're getting close to 200. We're almost there, folks. We need another angel donator to step in and help us out with getting Holly out here for her birthday next week. Would really appreciate it. Please, please, please. Again, love you long time. Uncommon Conspiracies said we love you long time too. So thanks for that. And we really appreciate everyone's support in trying to get Holly out. I've really overspent on Salem research and all the books and the trips and travel and everything, hotels and everything to do all of this research. So really appreciate all of the help on that, and really apologize that the audio is sucking so badly. It looks like I almost pulled the mixer right off the table there. That probably would have fixed it, fixed the problem permanently. And now I'm not getting any audio coming through. Wow.
So yeah, the thing that cracked me up when someone mentioned how they used to want to take mushrooms watching your show was that I guess it's like I can kind of simultaneously thank Jan for introducing me to McKenna and for breaking me away from McKenna. So I don't know. I guess it cancels out because, Jan claims to have put out a lot of the lectures, the McKenna lectures that I listened to. And then I could also thank him for exposing the fact that he was CIA. So I guess it just kind of cancels out. I mean, granted, I did take some drugs, but that was in my 20s. So, I guess it all comes out in the wash, I suppose.
Well, yeah, so that's a perfect example because, I was caught into it too. And then, in 2002, a friend of mine died, and I inherited, she who remembers, I inherited all of her audio archives. She worked at Pacifica Radio in KPFK Los Angeles, which should have been a big red flag on its own. I didn't realize that, and Hans Utter and I did a show on the secret history of FM radio I recommend people checking out. But the Pacifica Network was the foundation of launching and creating FM radio and all of these. The network is basically used to promote communist propaganda. And so when she died in April 2002, I inherited all of her audio, and I had promised her before she died that I would encode all of this audio from cassette onto MP3. So I ended up putting out all of this stuff, and by the time I released it all, and tell you what, there was like 50 or 60 hours of Terence McKenna in there, and by the time I finished producing, I never wanted to hear McKenna again. But unfortunately, and back then it was all released on Napster and these programs, and people could download it directly back then. And so I was just reading somebody's comment. So I bought into it, and then as I began doing that series of interviews that I just showed everyone, I began to see the whole process. That that all of these academics, and by then Gene O'Denney did introduce me to the trivium as well, and that was what really made things go aha. But began to see it and realize that the whole thing was a fraud. And then in 2011, I published Gordon Wasson, The Man, the Legend, the Myth, and immediately, and to this day, not one academic has ever addressed any of the research that I did in that article. None of the primary citations I've used, but I lost about 60 academic friends in a week for publishing that article. And again, not one has ever dealt with any of the research. And no, Holly is not my handler. You guys can stop being smart, Alex. But, follow the research rather than name calling.
So someone did mention in the chat that, and I've wanted to do on this or discuss this, like why Michael Pollan is now discussing psychedelics and promoting psychedelics. And I think I kind of put him in the same window as Jordan Peterson. So Michael Pollan wrote some really great books about food and organic food and factory farming. And, I've been following his work for quite a while, and now all of a sudden it seems like he has switched to promoting psychedelics. And just to tie it back to the Royal Society. Royal Society does a lot of research on psychedelics as well, and they have a sorry, Amit is going off. Science. They're promoting magic mushrooms, how they rearrange your brain. So the Royal Society is actually promoting mushroom research now.
Yep. Oh, I think Holly just muted her mic. Maybe I think that's why the audio just died on that side. But so interestingly, and I'm going to pull this up here. So Albert Hoffman's boss, Arthur Stoll. Let me get that up here. Arthur Stoll was Albert Hoffman's boss at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. Now, I believe that Arthur Stoll is really who invented LSD, and they passed the invention of it over to Albert Hoffman to cover up 18 or 20 years of human experiments that they were doing. I suspect that LSD was actually invented around 1918, and there's a book by Leo Perutz called St. Peter's Snow. And in this book, he talks about fungus from wheat being used to create a drug that they create a communist rebellion with, which is exactly what they used LSD for. But the problem is that St. Peter's Snow was published 5 years before Albert Hoffman supposedly invented it. Now, Leo Perutz, interestingly enough, is a family member to Max Perutz. Now, let's see if you can guess this, folks. Max Perutz is a member of the Royal Society. Excuse me, the Royal Society. So, you know, we have, again, this connection going right back to the Royal Society, to early LSD research. So I suspect Max told his family member Leo Perutz about the research that Arthur Stoll had done for, again, the Royal Society, and they put all of this stuff out. And of course, Arthur Stoll also helped to isolate psilocybin, which of course is the active ingredient in magic quote-unquote mushrooms, so named by CIA agent Gordon Wasson, one of the biggest frauds of all. Of course, I run GordonWasson.com to expose that guy as well. Yeah, and English Island is correct about my former co-host. I'll leave it at that. But, you know, don't, you know, there's still a lot. Just ignore his tying his bogus research about Christianity to my work and just focus on the content exposing MKUltra, and, you know, the rest of it's fine. He does try to tie his crap into my work, though. But, and then Rudolf Steiner, I suspect, was heavily involved in that. And there are quotes that I have found, and they should be up here. The story starts way back in 1935 with a group of followers of the German mystic Rudolf Steiner, who lived in a village in southern Germany. In 1935, a dark cloud was over Europe. Of course, never mind, it's the elites and the Royal Society and all the eugenicists, and they are who manufactured the world wars to kill off the population. And so, you know, these, you know, unintelligent people blame the masses for the war rather than those who actually created and caused the wars. And so this is the lack of intelligence of these kind of people. And so a dark cloud was over Europe. So the members of this group set out to very deliberately to synthesize chemicals which were like the natural vegetable substances they were all well aware had been used in the world's major religious traditions. Of course, that is a baited statement right there. In the world's major religious statements. And now, there was a thread running through the Apocrypha from Dionysus in the texts that have been removed from the Bible about that. And that is where I think the mushrooms and Christianity, quote-unquote, came from. Now, it was a cult. I recant or take back some of my earlier statements on that. But by 1938, they had synthesized psilocybin, LSD, and about 30 other drugs. Now, again, the problem with this date right here is the Leo Perutz book and discussing it before the official invention date in 1938 of LSD. And so, you know, they had stopped to think... They had stopped to think about the consequences of letting all this loose and decided against it. They decided they were not sure what the negative effects of the drug would be. See, and this is why I created the term suggestogen for these drugs, because they cause hypersuggestion. It's not a true religious experience. You're not living in logos or truth. All that ever was, is, or could be is truth. You know, so when you realize that God is truth, you realize that all of this stuff is a trick. And that's what happened to me after years and years of researching all this. So they had stopped to think about the skipping down. They decided they were not sure what the negative effects of the drugs would be, and that it was just a very wise thing to do. 5 years later, in 1943, when Europe was really in bad shape, they decided, apparently, that possible negative consequences were nothing compared to the consequences of not doing this. So again, they target the population with drugs, not the elites themselves who were doing all of this stuff. And this is Willis Harriman, who worked with Stanford Research Institute and was another member of MKUltra and the Changing Images of Man project, headed by Joseph Campbell. Holly, you want to take over?
So I have been fascinated with the history of the Royal Society, but as we will be doing in our next video, we will be talking about more of the modern influences of the Royal Society. So we might be doing like a, 20th century into nowadays, probably with our next video. And I just wanted to mention that if you look into the connection, someone mentioned the new age, and we could go on and on. That's a whole other topic, talking about the the idea of the new age and scientism. And the Royal Society is very forward with their promotion of the new age. They call it the new age of science. So UK Royal Society chief, the modern chief of the Royal Society, heralds a new age of biology. So they're promoting transhumanism. They say genetic engineering is the new age. And they say that the head of the new Royal Society says that we're on the verge of a new age of biology. So advances in genetics challenge public notions of what is natural and unnatural. So they're on the forefront. The Royal Society has always been on the forefront of genetically modified organisms. So in our food system, they were the biggest propagandists for genetic modification of food, what they call golden rice, etc. You might remember that. So just to mention about genetic modification, I'm sure their plan was to genetically modify small organisms, then our food system, and then now genetically modifying people and transhumanism. That's the next part of their new age. And then another point I want to make is that Vice magazine, which Jan has talked about, I believe they're Canadian, right?
Correct. It was a Canadian punk rock magazine originally.
Okay,
to sell the agenda.
Exactly. So there's a very interesting connection between Vice magazine and the Royal Society and their promotion of drug culture. So it's a project called Safe Sesh. So it's a quote unquote harm reduction campaign launched by Vice in collaboration with the Royal Society for Public Health. So literally Vice magazine with the Royal Society is putting out ways for people to do safe drug use. So everything from cocaine to LSD to mushrooms. So if you need an example of how all of this is propaganda, look no further than Vice and the Royal Society creating something called Safe Sesh.
I have a funny story. So Royal Society. Vice contacted me several months back wanting me to do a show with, what's his name? I forget who's done a bunch of shows. I won't mention his name right now. But I told them if they didn't mind me I told them I needed full editorial control of my segment, and that as long as they didn't mind me exposing that their whole thing was an intelligence operation, that I would come on the show. And of course I never heard back from them. Darn it. So you know, that's kind of funny. Now, you had mentioned transhumanism a minute ago. Do you know, Holly, who came up with the term transhumanism? Don't
Huxley.
look it up. It was Julian Huxley, correct?
Yes. What do I get for a prize?
If it's a, you know, if it's a hot steaming pile of you know what, you know, Huxley invented it. So, oh goodness, you know, we're close to $200, folks. Anybody, please throw in so we can get Holly out here for her birthday. We'd greatly appreciate it. Please, 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 please. Love you long time, everybody. Yes.
Someone said they threw you a little bit of Bitcoin, so thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I appreciate that, and much appreciated. I'll definitely go check that out. So anyway, well, we kind of segued off target there for a little while.
Yeah, I think we got off of our notes.
Is there anything we forgot to discuss?
I think you had mentioned something about connecting Darwin's theory of evolution, natural man, and you put Popol Vuh in the notes. So I don't know if you just want to talk a little bit about evolution, and maybe we can get another super chat or two while Jan does that.
Yeah. So yeah, I have this really crazy theory. See, look, she's giving the pleading eyes there. I have this really crazy theory that Darwin's theory of evolution is actually just another inversion. And in this book, this is the Popol Vuh, and that is a Maya book, and they talk about how they lost their own book, and they were probably originally one of the 12 tribes. But they talk about, here, let me see if I can find it. that men devolved from iniquity. And so when you see the Royal Society and the CIA, the Esalen Institute, SRI, Tavistock, when you see them promoting, all of this degeneracy and iniquity, then it goes to support, in my opinion, this possibility that, you know, you only need to look outside, really. I can go down to Los Angeles if I want to see fallen people everywhere. But you can see that it's apparent that the Popol Vuh may actually be correct, that people devolve rather than evolve. And that would be why the Royal Society and these groups are promoting all of this poor behavior. Do drugs, get the big bull ring in your nose, put the huge, not earphones, but the huge holes in your ears, get all of the tattoos, because natural man is better. We have to get back to natural man, they claim. But that is actually our most fallen state, when you're totally out of touch with truth, when you're high all the time. I'm trying to find the citation now. I can't find it. My goodness. So anyway, I was hoping to find it, but it's a really.
We've just talked about, like, while Jan's looking for that real quick.
Go ahead.
Even just the idea of how people look, and fashion and self-care and self-worth. Like, people have really degraded. Like, I have like some old Maine postcards of people at the beach, and it's just like a random photograph of Old Orchard Beach, and everyone looks beautiful. Like, people are thin, they look healthy. And I do think this connects once again into the GMO food. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I think we're going to find out in trans fats, etc., plastics basically within our food system, etc., factory farming. All of this has degraded the food system. We've become severely ill. I mean, we have a sick care system. People do look like we are falling apart. And then if you look at fashion, I've talked about this a lot, how people used to put a lot of pride into how people looked and how we would dress and look nice. And now, like, there's like the old website, like People of Walmart and stuff like that. It's just like, we laugh at how people have degraded, but it used to be funny for me, a decade ago. And now for me, it's actually really, really concerning to see what is happening to people.
Well, and people give me a hard time because I started wearing a Stetson fedora, and and Holly bought me a nice hat recently, when she was in Texas 3 or 4 months ago, and trying to step it up a little bit, but I'll get a hard, people give me a hard time just for wearing a nice hat or whatever, and not wearing just a lousy baseball cap. But what's interesting is, even like the poor and homeless, even if their clothes were tattered, they wore a suit. They wore a nice suit all the way up into the 1950s, up until the CIA's psychedelic revolution. So again, this is...
I think the t-shirt and jean culture, if you think about hippie culture, I think a lot of that, like the idea of a t-shirt, that used to be an undershirt,
Right.
It was like wearing a bra in public or something. It was completely obscene to wear a t-shirt in public. And now, that it's been popularized, and that's what everyone wears all the time.
So Bahara, I can't say that. I'm sorry for slaughtering your name there, and thank you for the donation earlier, but she says, man, I've been thinking about Darwinism being a Kabbalistic inversion ever since your shows. So, and the scripture supports it. And I agree with that. I think they went through the Bible. They went through other religious texts, I think including the Quran and the Book of Mormon, etc. And this one here, and this one is by Alan J. Christensen. And they went through and they took all of this stuff and they inverted it. And I exactly agree with that. Because when you see that, when you go through and you read these books, you can see that they just take every major point on how people should behave, and so that your family lives on, so that you don't have a cruddy life, etc. She said I pronounced it perfectly. I can't even believe it. And don't ask me to do it twice. So this book goes on, and this is page 88. Why was it that you didn't give us our food? All we did was look at you and chase you away. You threw us out. You raised sticks against us. And skipping, I'm just going to read the best parts. Thus you have spoken to us. We could not speak, therefore we received nothing from you. How could you not have understood this? You did understand. We were forgotten because of you. I think they were fallen because of their own iniquity. Therefore you shall try the teeth that are in your mouths. And pain you have caused us. Our mouths and our faces are sooty. We were forever, forever throwing us upon the fire and burning us. Although we felt no pain, you now shall try it. We shall burn you. Thus their faces were all crushed. The stones of the hearth flattened them, and they would come out from the fire, landing on their heads and causing them pain. They fled, they hurried away, and skipping down. Thus the framed people, the shaped people, were undone. They were demolished and overthrown as a people. It is said that the spider monkeys that are in the forest today are descendants of these people. So we're not evolved from monkeys. In other words, we devolve to monkeys, is what the Popol Vuh argues. And I wouldn't be surprised for a bit. I mean, I know it sounds like about as crazy, wacky conspiracy theories as you can get, but, you know, when you start reading all of these texts and everything, it starts making a whole lot of sense. And then you can see them promoting this and trying to create everybody to go into the fall, to go back into the natural man, into, you know, running around in the jungle with a stick through your nose and a spear and, you know, mostly naked. And that's where they want everybody, you know, and able to, you know, no critical thinking, no, you know, anyway, I'm sure most of you can see where I'm going with that, those who aren't totally upset by it. And please throw us a super chat, someone. Please go to the Logos Media website, support, hit the Patreon button, etc. Help us out. Help get Holly out for her birthday. We much appreciate it. We got 8 dislikes for this show. Boy, the trolls are out. Everybody who likes what we're trying to get out and do, please hit the like button there, and we really appreciate it.
It's interesting. I wanted to mention, just tying this back into ether and you know, the promotion of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, the theory of relativity, and how that connects into moral relativity. So we started to see that more and more with scientism promoting the idea of relativism, and, you know, it depends on, like, what do they call it, the double slit experiment or Schrodinger's cat. It goes back to, oh, well, it's, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. So everything, therefore, if you start to look into, you know, string theory or quantum mechanics, I really got into that. Like, I had been raised a Catholic, and then I had someone when I was in college gave me, what was it called? The God delusion or something like that. Richard Dawkins,
right,
who's also, I believe he is a member of the Royal Society.
Yes, he's a fellow of the Royal Society.
So I had read that book, and I was told, you know, by my college friends that was, you know, that this was it was a, you know, God delusion, moral relativity, quantum mechanics. I started to get into quantum physics, all that sort of stuff, looking for some sort of spirituality. And of course, you know, getting into drug culture, thinking that would provide me with some sort of spiritual grounding or experience. And then actually from quantum mechanics and quantum physics, talking about relativity, it did actually bring me back to God again, because the idea of just moral relativity is complete degeneracy, you know, saying nothing matters at this point. You know, dark matter is what they bring in to people, that, you know, if you're talking about heliocentrism, you know, we are no longer the center of the universe. You know, we're just floating out into nothingness. The world, the universe is continually expanding. We're just a fleck of dust or whatever, if you will. And it takes away the power and the ability of humans to see how important and how special we really are. And not to get, you know, too religious, but if you do think about inversion and inversion of moral relativity and relativity in science. That's what a lot of the promotion is on a spiritual level, is the idea that we don't matter and that there's moral relativism. And I'm hoping people will start to see, you know, through the trivium and other research that things do matter. You know, you do matter, guys. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we're about done here, Holly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
We're almost 2 hours in. Anyone catch this? We can sure use the support to get Holly out. I've really overextended myself. Thanks for all the great comments in the chat today. Really appreciate everybody's intelligent input. And the trolls really, you know, weren't in there much today, thank goodness. But so thank you everyone for your support and contributions. Thanks also for hitting the Patreon button or sending us direct donations. Thanks for the Bitcoin donation as well. I missed who that was. And everyone, good night. Check out Uncommon Conspiracies page if you're bored for the evening, and check out some of his funny stuff. And thanks everyone again, and bye-bye. See you next week. Oh, thank you, Barea, again. Sorry if I didn't pronounce it correctly that time, for the $10 donation just now. Thank you so much for that, and good night, everyone.